Welcome everybody to the final session of these wonderful conferences about Mexican art history. Today, the name of the conference is Creating a Nation, Contemporary and Modern Art in Mexico in the 19th, 20th century. Autonomous University of Mexico. And now we give the floor to Professor Mariana Favila. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pablo. I'm going to share my screen again as usual. Okay, I think you are now being able to see my screen. Yeah. So, welcome everyone to the last session of this course. Today we will focus on modern and contemporary art and how it relates to the creation of Mexico as a nation. The world in the late 18th and early 19th centuries was going through important political, social, and economic changes. The Enlightenment ideas brought about a political and social change that resulted in many monarchies disappearing and the rise of modern nations. In Mexico, this struggle began in 1810 with a desire by some sectors of the New Spain society to have more participation in the decisions of the Spanish crown. But in the face of the king's refusal, the ideas were radicalized and provoked Mexico's independence in 1821. During its first 50 years of life, the emergent country was involved in constant internal and external wars. Mexico faced wars with France and Spain, but perhaps it was the confrontations with the United States that most undermined the nation. Thus, the vast territory that once was Mexico began to lose several territories gradually. Shortly after Mexico's independence, the territories of Central America became independent. This one here. Later, in 1836, the same thing happened with Texas here. And the war with the USA in 1848 made it lose the northern part of the territory here. In 1853, with the sale of the Mesilla, this part here, the current shape of the country was configured, which is everything that you can see here in blue, and the modern state of Chiapas that is here in green. Likewise, internal struggles did not help the country's situation. The conservative and liberal parties were constantly fighting between them to decide who would control the nation's political path. Each of the sides took their main means of expression. Thus, while the liberals wrote prolific disquisitions and books, the conservatives appropriated the plastic arts and architecture, this being the main cause of the absence of pro-independence themes. Since the creation of the San Carlos Academy in 1785, as we saw yesterday, artistic training focused on the repetition and appropriation of Greek and Roman forms. As a consequence, the cities of Mexico soon began to change their appearance. One of the main architects was Manuel Tolsa, who created such emblematic buildings as the Palacio de Minería, which you can see in the screen, which integrates into its central part the facade of a Greek temple, Manuel Tolsá is also the author of the Hospicio Cabañas, where the style is further refined, and in the middle of a quarry wall, there is a temple with Doric columns and a smooth triangular pediment. Hospicio Cabañas is in the modern city of Guadalajara. The use of Greco-Roman canons also influences sculpture. Artists such as Manuel Vilar represented characters from pre-Hispanic times, but as if they were works of classical antiquity, with exaggerated muscles and postures typical of the Greek sculptures. If you remember, we actually saw a representation of the Malinche, and see how different she was represented in 1852. Being associated with the conservatives, the painting depicted religious themes, but with national elements, integrating the Mexican into the biblical narrative. Perhaps one of the best examples is the painting made by Rafael Flores, who represented the Holy Family, with Jose or Joseph working with wood here, Christ making a cross with 2 planks, and Mary looking excited at her son while she is spinning, and at her feet you can see the Mexican flag. There is also the painting of the interior of Noah's Ark by Joaquin Ramirez, where Noah here is observed receiving from the dove the olive branch that announces that the waters of the flood began to descend. His children and their wives are depicted as Greek figures. Still, it is striking that there is an indigenous couple in their traditional clothing sitting in the floor in a corner, making themselves part of human salvation. Along with these paintings, artists began to paint landscapes that show the Mexican geography and help create a Mexican identity. Churches, rivers, ravines, volcanoes, and large plains were painted, showing the splendor of the territory, as in Eugenio Landesi's paintings. Perhaps the best exponent of the landscape painting is José María Velasco. He combines the exuberance of the territory along with examples of modernity, such as the railway, and his artworks portray the new face that Mexico wanted to forge. The most attractive works of Velasco are these panoramic views that depict the Valley of Mexico, showing what remained of the lake here, a small city, and large volcanoes in the background. So remember this view here, and now compare it with this one here. This painted landscape is completely different from the current view of the city, where urban growth has drained the lake and covered the nearby hills with houses. This view is the same view that José María Velasco was representing here. It was taken from the Santa Bel Hill, both of them. So you can compare how much the landscape has changed. At the beginning of 1860, the conflict between the conservatives and liberals reached its peak when the second French intervention took place. And for a short time, Mexico had an emperor from the royal house of the Habsburgs. It wasn't until the victory of the liberals, led by Benito Juárez, that they restored the republic. From this moment on, and especially during the government of Porfirio Díaz, who lasted more than 30 years in power, artists wanted to create a modern and splendid Mexico. Large palaces inspired by French styles were built, such as the Postal Building or Edificio Postal, which has the main facade in one corner and decoration that recalls medieval elements. Also, in the once mercantile center, which today is the Grand Hotel in Mexico City, there is an Art Nouveau architecture with curved ironwork, flowers, and plant leaves, with a huge stained glass window that adorns its vault in the roof. The most representative building of this time was the Palace of Fine Arts, or el Palacio de Bellas Artes. It gives the city a unique character with a series of domes and various decorative and sculptural elements. Other types of paintings show an idyllic, perfect society. For example, Manuel Ocaranza painted traditional themes, especially ladies of the high society, as the one that you can see here in this picture, where women are represented in domestic interiors, surrounded by beautiful and elegant objects, lost in her thoughts and with an emotional and sentimental expression. Artists also represented the life of the population in a bucolic way, as in the paint Flower of the Lake of Flor del Lago, where the calm and peaceful life of a flower seller is represented while she paddles in her canoe, beautifully dressed and with a multicolored merchandise. I hope we don't lose the electricity here because there is a huge torment outside, so hopefully that won't happen. As well as representing the calm and harmonious life lived by the entire population of Mexico, it was also necessary to begin to create a unique history of Mexico. So the historical scenes from different periods began to be painted, emphasizing the pre-Hispanic past, which was considered the country's foundation. For example, what you can see here in this painting that I really like a lot is the Spaniards are actually torturing Cuauhtemoc, who was the last ruler from the Aztecs, and they decided that they wanted to burn his feet in order to regain some information that they wanted. So this is quite an amazing representation of an actual history fact. The sculpture also copied the French forms, leaving part of the stone unworked and giving the figure great expressiveness. In Malgré Tout, you can see a woman lying face down here, completely naked, who is in chains and shackles. She appears raising her face with a gesture of not surrendering to the oppression. Naked women representations are quite common in the sculptures of this period. For example, in Après l'orgie, or After the Orgy, or Después de la Orgía, we can see a woman lying on her back, detaching herself from the block that imprisons her, expressing her exhaustion after the euphoria and pleasure of this encounter. This is a sculpture that shows the freedom ideals of the society of this moment. At the end of the 19th century, art reflected a society of great luxury. The paintings showed a peaceful and happy society, while the sculptures reflected the pleasure in which they lived. Photography was also another kind of artistic type, and as you can see here in this picture, where we can see the fashion that was in that moment present. But this idyllic society that all the artists were trying to represent in their different artworks was not such. It wasn't real, and actually the economic sustain of the high social classes was based on exploiting a large part of the population, most of them indigenous people. Eventually, this situation became unacceptable, and in 1910, the Mexican Revolution broke out after the re-election once again of Porfirio Diaz. We are very lucky to actually have photographs from all these periods. This movement, revolution, went through different stages until 1917, when the government of Venustiano Carranza, after several alliances and after defeating various opposition groups, finally reached the power. At this moment, the Mexican Constitution was created. It was the first constitution in Mexico, and also it was the first constitution in the world with an important social character. At this time, Mexico entered a crossroads when it had to decide what kind of society it wanted to create. A nation related to the outside world, but also one that glorified the local, the Mexican. I have to mention that this is one of the pictures that I love the most because we see a woman that was participating in the revolution, and the name, how we know them, this kind of woman that participated in revolution is soldadera. So it's a very special picture because of that. The buildings very soon began to acquire the characteristic vertical lines of Art Deco, as can be seen in the current National Lottery Building or Edificio de la Lotería Nacional. The Palace of Fine Arts had been built before the revolution, as I mentioned before, but it was left unfinished due to the armed uprising. Therefore, when its construction started again, the interior was decorated with straight lines and gold and black colors, as you can see in this image. The art that the government and academy must
Hola, buenas tardes.
Hola, ¿sí se escucha?
Sí. Tenemos problemas técnicos, se fue la ponente. Entonces, esperamos a que regrese.
I'm here.
Ya regresó, ya regresó.
I am in the dark, in the darkness. Avan is actually helping me to enlighten. So I'm going to turn off my, well, no, I'm not going to turn off my video, but I'm going to share my screen again. Okay, can you see me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Thank you. Please let me know if you can see the presentation because I'm not so sure what's happening now. Can you see the presentation? Okay, the light is back, but now I'm not gonna be disconnected. Okay, so you can see, right?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yes.
I thank you. So sorry because we are having like kind of a hurricane outside here in Mexico City. So I'm so sorry for that. Here we are. Everything's fine. Okay, so let's continue. As I was saying, the art and the government, the art that the government and the academy most supported at this time was painting, and especially mural painting. And this had the purpose of creating a narrative of their situation. The first painting project was carried out by Jose Vasconcelos, who brought together several artists to decorate the current Colegio de San Ildefonso in Mexico City. These murals sought to reflect how art and science allow humans to reach the inventive principle of the universe. So I'm going to try to explain some of the most important murals and what they were trying to reflect and express here. So one of the best examples is this Diego Rivera's mural, which is called Creación, or the creation. And this mural is actually separated into three sections. This is the first section, this is the second section here, and this is the third section in the middle. On the left side, we can see feminine figures, also a man here probably, and the representation of dance, music, song, and comedy. All these type of arts allow to develop the virtues of faith, hope, and charity, and thereby achieve wisdom here. On the right side, we see the masculine essences, erotic poetry, drama, traditional knowledge, and these activities allow men to develop the virtues of resiliency, strength, justice, and prudence. And with it, we are supposed to be able to achieve love. These two principles, wisdom and love, are integrated into the creative principle, represented by a sun here, with three rays at the end, with three rays and stars, and three hands here. So this is one of the first examples of mural painting in this moment, 1922. Also, as you see, as we have just seen, the mural of La Creación is very different from the following murals by Diego Rivera. So what happened is that Diego Rivera went and made a trip to the USSR. And he became very interested in the social problems that affected people. One of the first examples of this new style is actually in the University of Chapingo, which, if I'm not wrong, is in the state of Mexico, where the earth, which is represented as a woman, is also being represented as repressed. Can you see me? Yes. Right? Because we lost light again here.
Sí, está bien. Te vemos.
Okay. Thank you. This is terrible. Okay, so let's continue. So as I was saying, the earth is represented as a woman, and she is being represented, repressed by the church here, the army, and the bourgeoisie or merchants or middle class. And this would confirm a triad that would be very common to find in all Rivera's paintings. The liberation of nature is seen in another painting. This is La Tierra Fecunda, where the earth, or again represented as a woman, wind, water, and fire are giving power to man here in this part. Oh, I don't know if you can see I don't think you can see my mouse, right? But I'm not being able to see my other screen, so okay. Who holds an apple? This man is holding an apple in the lower part of the picture, which is a symbol of knowledge. And then he passes this technology to a child, the future generations. So the most important message of this image is that science and technology will eventually help to achieve a very high state of goodness in humanity. This social turn in art allowed the emergence of new topics, such as people everyday activities. One of the most innovative artists was Fermin Raveltas, who, with geometrical figures and vibrant colors, created unparalleled compositions, as the one you can see in the slide. Diego Rivera will also exalt the traditions of the peoples of Mexico in one of the murals in the patios of the Public Education Secretary, which is the Secretaría de Educación Pública. He painted a scene here where we can see indigenous children which are swimming in a cenote. What is a cenote? A cenote is basically like a huge hole in the earth, and they only exist in the peninsula of Yucatan. And underwater, yeah, subterranean water gets to these holes, and it forms like some kind of pool, natural pool. So what we see here is children that are swimming and indigenous women who are staring at them peacefully while carrying water. In modern Mexico, traditional urban scenes were also important to represent. And in the Dia de los Muertos mural, which is the Day of the Dead, they were also painted. Here, you can see a crowd that buys various products and some children wearing skull masks. I wish I could point at them, but well, in the central part, there are 3 skeleton puppets. The first one is a peasant, a man that works in the field. The second one is an agrarista, which is a revolutionary soldier. And the third one is a worker probably from a factory or something like that. Who for Diego Rivera were the counterpart. These 3 characters were the counterpart of the evil triad formed by the church, the bourgeoisie, and the army. As I was saying, for Diego Rivera, these 2 social groups, the ones that were formed by the people belonging to the church, the army, and the middle class, against the campesinos and the soldiers of the people which were not part of the army, etc., they were always against each other. And in this mural, we see, which is actually created by 3 different scenes, and it's called El Corrido de la Revolución. He created several scenes where these groups are represented in antagonist positions. Yes, now I can see my screen. For example, in the first one, this one here, this one is called, damn it, the capitalist dinner. We see rich people eating gold, while the common people is behind, mocking them while they hold real food in their hands. The second scene is called the orgy, and it represents members of the church, the military, and the bourgeoisie throwing a wild party, while the peasants and the soldiers are behind, planning how to end with this excess. The third mural shows people working, armed, and ready to fight for their rights. In the upper part, we see the following words: whoever wants to eat must work. El que quiera comer, que trabaje. The meaning of this last scene is that eventually the exploitation of lower classes will come to an end. So as you can see, a lot of social critique is in this kind of mural painting. Diego Rivera also painted the history of Mexico on the walls of the National Palace. I will describe these murals now, and the narrative begins with this scene here, representing the pre-Hispanic world. The mural is divided in 2 parts. On the right, we can see people doing different things, like dancing and playing music, eating, etc. They are basically gathered there together to do daily life activities. On the left, we can see a fight, a war taking place. We can also see priests and warriors. And in the center is the figure of Quetzalcoatl, the creator of culture. If you remember, I have been mentioning Quetzalcoatl since the session on Monday. And in the first session, Quetzalcoatl was a serpent. Here we see him represented as a human. And if you recall, I told you that at some point in the history of pre-Hispanic times, Quetzalcoatl was actually a man, also conceived as a man. And he was like a kind of character that was responsible for the creation of culture. So this is the reason that we are seeing here again being represented. In the next scene, which is in another wall of this building in the National Palace, we see how this war was interrupted by the Conquest. So what we are basically seeing here is Spaniard soldiers fighting against indigenous warriors. For this reason, is in this central panel, the cruel war that the Spaniards and the indigenous people carried out is being represented. For Diego Rivera, the Spaniards managed to defeat the indigenous due to a key element, firearms. Of course, as we discussed also on Monday, if I remember well, this is not the only reason why the Spaniards managed to defeat the indigenous. Also, in the upper right part of this whole scene, this one, we can see soldiers with shotguns here and cannons firing at the indigenous people. On the right, on this part here. Above, you can also see people destroying the ancient pre-Hispanic city, where luckily we have those signals to identify each part. And in the left, we can see the friars protecting the indigenous people from the Spanish abuses. Now I go to the left part of this whole mural, the opposite side. Here we can see the construction of a new city and how it begins. Also, we can see how violent it was, the imposition of Christianity, since in the central part, 2 men are being burned by the Inquisition. Finally, in this upper section of the wall, in the lunettes of the arcs, the Mexico of the 19th century and its path to liberation is represented. Rivera also included the North American invasion of 1848 and the lawsuit between liberals and conservatives on the other side. So as you can see, we are actually viewing all the history of Mexico represented in this mural. In the other side, on the left side, the French intervention was painted with the government of Maximiliano and the War of the Mexican Revolution. In the center, we can see heroes of independence, accompanied by a worker, a peasant, a city dweller, and other characters that have been depicted, pointing to the future. And this whole mural narrative, this mural painting ends with this last scene, where we can see how, despite what one might think, the future actually doesn't look as good for Mexico. Rivera wanted to communicate that the construction of a new nation could only be achieved with the effort of all the social classes, not only through the participation of the army, the church, and the bourgeoisie. If this doesn't change, Rivera was actually trying to predict that the city as we know it will burn, and that the peasants, the people from, and the workers and the soldiers that participated in the revolution will be responsible to build a new Mexico where all people are equal. Unfortunately, this is a Mexico that we are still waiting for. The history of Mexico, as you can see, became a flag of social fight. The heroes of independence were embodied as symbols of this fight. Miguel Hidalgo became one of the most represented characters. Miguel Hidalgo was the person that actually started the independence movement. And this is a mural of Jose Clemente Orozco that is really famous. Okay. The Conquest, as we have seen, was another of the most common themes. In González Camarena's mural, we see a traumatic moment being represented, where 2 cultures are destroyed in a violent attack to finally found modern Mexico. The impact of the figures increases with the warm colors, creating an impressive image. Now, in addition to the direction that muralism undertook, other painters took other paths. And this is the case of Frida Kahlo, who you must have heard of before. Many of her paintings depict the suffering of the modern world. For her, Mexico was torn between its Western European identity and the indigenous one. For this reason, we see in this famous painting, which is called Las Dos Fridas, or the Two Fridas. Frida, a woman dressed in the European style in the left, and another one in a Tehuana costume, which is a traditional costume. Their hearts are exposed, and they are both joined by a vein. The European woman cuts one of her veins with scissors and drips the blood on her dress. The other Frida carries a small portrait of her beloved Diego Rivera. You must remember that Frida Kahlo and Diego Rivera were married. And this small portrait that Frida is holding in her hand, it's connected to one of the hearts arteries. So this completely different world created by women will also highlight an oniric aspect of the world, like in the painting of Remedios Varo, which is one of my favorites. She created a magical world. In this painting, the revelation or the watchmaker, which is la revelación o el relojero, you can appreciate a watchmaker who sees a revelation that makes him understand the world, the universe, and the essence of life. In the back, some clocks are ticking simultaneously, and inside, if you actually pay attention, you can see characters from different periods imprisoned in their own time. By the middle of the 20th century, Mexico began to embrace modernity. The city was growing bigger each year, and the economy was growing as well. It seemed that Mexico was finally going to become a powerful nation. Hospitals, schools, and multifamily homes were built, and the regionalist plastic was abandoned, seeking to create art in line with the international world. One of the architects who began to create a new city was Luis Varegan, who incorporated different materials and used bright colors on the walls so that the experience of being inside the building would create a particular experience. In his works, the walls acquire individual plastic value, and the light symbolically enters the room. Now, from the mid-20th century, we have this amazing example, Ciudad Universitaria, Ciudad Universitaria, which is in the UNAM, in the south of Mexico City. And this is one of the most outstanding places. Here, the buildings are creating a union between the traditional and the modern. And the idea is that this place reunites nationalist themes and modern architecture. So probably some of the people that are listening to us have been there before. Modernity is also reflected in the creation of new concrete solutions. And in the restaurant, this is a restaurant, Manantiales in Xochimilco, a parabola is used to create the roof and walls of the building. At the same time, it is united with the aquatic environment where the building seems to be floating on. One of the most distinguished buildings of modern Mexican architecture is the National Museum of Anthropology. And the different rooms of the museum are surrounding a rectangular patio in the center. And in the back, which is the entrance, there is a huge umbrella that is actually representing a cosmic tree. And also this little pool that you can see here, which is not natural, is also a representation of the old lakes, the ancient lakes in New Mexico, in Tenochtitlan. The plastic arts will also be transformed. And perhaps David Alfaro Siqueiros is one of the best examples of abstract art. In his last mural, as in those of the Siqueiros Polyforum, the Siqueiros Polyforum is a building. The figures were created with different materials, and they acquire volumetry by mixing the organic forms with geometric figures. Also, the pre-Hispanic and indigenous topics will be represented in the abstract art. And one of the most amazing representations of this type of art is Tamayo's work. Here what we see is the fight of day and night, of the snake and the jaguar, of the feminine and the masculine. If you remember, in actually both of the sessions that we already had, I spoke of the jaguar and the serpent and how important they were to pre-Hispanic societies and to indigenous people during the colonial period. So it's interesting to actually see how this topic is still present in the modern times. In rescuing the indigenous world, the work of Francisco Toledo has a fundamental importance in contemporary art. He represented forms, themes, and legends of Mexican origin, created with earthy textures. I speak of him in past tense because he unfortunately just passed away, if I'm not wrong, 2 years ago. And it was really a huge loss for everyone here in Mexico because he was an amazing artist. These topics were inspired by the land of the Istmo de Tehuantepec, which is in Oaxaca, where the artist was born. If you ever have an opportunity to see his work of art online in internet, you will be able to see that he was one of the greatest modern contemporary artists. Oh my God, this is terrible. I'm so sorry. Similarly, José Luis Cuevas, the best-known artist of this generation, mixes expressiveness, graphic illustration, and caricature. This painting here that you can see portrays an old man with a huge and deformed head. His horrible face is actually a metaphor for the abuse of power and greed, and is trying to reflect in an artistic way the corruption that began to take over Mexico and that still exists. And another work of art, abstract art, we find it in the work of Manuel Felgueres, and he is one of the best exponents of this artistic artistic style. This is a painting called Agenda 2030, Agenda 2030, which is actually referring to these 17 main goals that the ONU established a few years ago, and which basically are trying to change many of the problems that we have, and expecting that this will be reflecting in 2030. And in this particular work of art, he's using geometric shapes, textures, and different spots of colors to represent two of the main goals of the Agenda 2030, which is to eliminate extreme poverty and to eliminate hunger. So this is also with a very specific meaning according to modern and contemporary problems of the world. So now we are actually coming quite quickly to an end. In the latest trends in Mexican art, there are some new artistic paths that have been developed, and some of these include conceptual art. There are three of them: the happening, the fluxus, and performance, which combine music, body expression, and plastic arts. The happening is a kind of conceptual art which is more related to plastic arts. Fluxus is another type of conceptual art which is more related with music. And performance is, again, another type of conceptual art which is related to body expression. And perhaps this piece, which is called the Mobile Matrix, or El Mobile Matrix, by Gabriel Orozco, which can be found in the Jose Vasconcelos library, is a good example of this novel art trend. What we see here is a whale skeleton, the skeleton of a whale, which is hanging in the library. And basically the idea is that it's interrupting a place where it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. We are not expecting to see the skeleton of a whale inside a library, and that is the idea of conceptual art. Mexico entered the 21st century by creating a dialogue between what was local and what was global. The artists began to create spaces where globalization was depicted, but still maintained the Mexican elements and identity. And the last image that we have for you here is the University Museum of Contemporary Art, which is also part of the Ciudad Universitaria here in the south of Mexico City. And it was created by one of the most amazing architects who also recently passed away in 2016, Teodoro González Ayala. And under the strangest circumstances, and with this last slide, we have finished the online course on Mexican art history. We hope that you have enjoyed as much as we have. I hope you are still actually seeing my screen. And I don't have anything else to say, but thank you so much for all your attention. We really hope, Avan and I, that that everything was clear as possible. I know that sometimes language it can be a problem, but we did our best. And now, if it's okay with everyone, if anyone has a comment or if anyone has a question, although I adore modern and contemporary art, I am not really such a specialist as Avan is. So he's next to me here. Maybe you won't be able to see him, but if you have any question, I will let him know what it is and he will answer to me and I will translate. So that would be all from our part. And again, thank you so much for your patience, and especially because of this weird situation that we are having. So actually, I don't know how to stop sharing my screen because I cannot see. Wait, I know how to do that. Yeah, now I can stop sharing my screen. Sorry. Yeah. Right. Okay. Thank you so much again for all your patience. Pablo Anudes, oh, sorry, I'm going to read some technical issues. Yeah, sorry for the technical issues. I look beautiful. Thank you so much. Yeah, Mrs. Delao, my comment is positive, but I wish we didn't always have to fixate a comment on the way women look. Yeah, that is also true. Sorry if that comment wasn't appropriated. Romantic atmosphere. Thank you. Thank you for your time and great effort in sharing. Thank you so much for all the comments, and I'm so sorry for this situation. It was something that we didn't expect. We ended up a little bit earlier also, and probably is the best because of this situation. We are having a terrible hurricane outside here. We don't have light, and I am actually connected with my iPhone, so thanks to technology. Thank you everyone, and thank you for your comments. We always take into account all of that. Thank you so much. Okay, so Avan is telling me here in the shadows that if anyone needs, if anyone needs and is interested in bibliography referring to colonial period and modern and contemporary art, please email him. I guess that he already shared his, email in the chat. So please, but I will put it again if it's from any kind of help, so you can Cuevas. Ay, Dios mío. Yeah, I'm going to share right now the email. That's the email from Avan. Thank you. Preguntan en YouTube si introducirías una clase de fotografía mexicana. Yes, of course, that is an excellent idea. If I would give a class of Mexican photography, probably we could do that. I'm actually working now in a project involving 19th century photographs of landscape from the foreign people that arrived in 1848, precisely one of the moments that we were mentioning today. And the landscape photographies that they create are amazing. And that would be really really honor if I could give a class on that. Yeah, thank you, everyone. It's been such an inspiring course. Thank you. We hope that this course, we wanted to share with you a little bit of our culture, and it was really hard to cover all the topics. But the idea is that you ever come to Mexico, at least have an idea and maybe identify something of what we have seen here, and then understand a little bit more of this amazing culture that we have here. Thank you so much. Amazing and representation. Thank you everyone. I guess no one has any questions, so everything was clear. Yeah, we have the youngest student that we have in this class, the youngest one, is called Andre, and I wanted to mention and bring it up because it's his birthday today. So congratulations, Andre, on your birthday. Happy birthday to you, and we hope you're having a great day. Yeah, he's our youngest student. Happy birthday from everyone to Andre. Oh, thank you so much. We really enjoy everything, and this is a very weird way to finish the course in the middle of the shadows. But again, thank you, Javier. I don't know, Avan, if you want to say something in the dark.
Thank you.
He says thanks. He's also very excited. I have to mention that Avan actually created all the presentations that you saw, and I helped him with the content also. But he actually is the one that created all the slides. So I have to say that also. Yeah, a seminar about photographs. Yeah, that would be great. Thank you. Okay. Pablo, I don't know if you want to say something or if Javier wants to say something just to close up.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Well, first of all, thank you very much, Mariana and Avan, for these excellent conferences. I think we learned a lot with both of you. I'm especially grateful for all the effort you did today with Avan dealing with this storm, because in the end you can solve the problem technically, and we in fact we can hear the conference very well. It was perfect. So I don't know if the audience has another question, because I think the last topic is very interesting, because it's one of the most representative moments in art in Mexico, and that it was like the Mexican brand of Mexican art that most of the people know in the world. I also would like to thank the main organizers that these conferences happened, that are the Teaching Center for Foreign Students of our university, the National Autonomous University of Mexico, and also the representation office of UNAM in Beijing, in China. Thank you very much to everybody.
I also want to thank Mariana and Avan for this course, and of course, UNAM China for letting us just, like make this course possible. And of course, to thank everyone who has attended these 3 very important and interesting sessions on Mexican culture and art. So thank you, thanks everyone. And hopefully we can just make some more courses in the near future.
Yeah, of course. By the way, someone is asking if we can share the presentations. Yes, of course. We don't have any problem by sharing all the presentations that we have. See? And actually, you can email Avan and he will send you the presentations in PDF. Any further plan for modern Mexico and art and contemporary art? That would be something to answer for Javier, probably, that question. If there is any further plan on modern Mexico art and contemporary, I guess if there is interest, I believe that would be possible, yes. Well, Javier? No? We lost Javier. Well, Pablo, no, Javier is there, okay. Everyone is having problems.
Here I am. Sorry about having problems with the internet connection.
Yeah.
But here I am. So say again, can you ask, can you make your question, please?
Yeah, Xiaopei is asking if there is any further plan for modern Mexico art and contemporary art. I imagine in course.
Well, actually, there are some more activities. We are having a course on Mexican history in September with the UNAM China, and we are having a cultural activity. I'll write down our webpage where you will find, you know, like all sort of activities and academic lectures. Actually, this was just like a very small course on pre-Hispanic Mexico, colonial Mexico, modern Mexico. I mean, there are so many things we can study on Mexico, and you can see all our other things we make down there in the web page. I will write it down in the chat box.
Great, perfect.
Also, we have, you know, like social media in Facebook, in Instagram, and in our YouTube channel. You can find all our conference from a long time on, with tons of topics.
Perfect, thank you. I never were able to use my background, but I think this is the perfect moment. Okay. Thank you, Javier, for answering that. Pueden ponerlos, can you put the links here to keep them like and follow them? Maybe that is also something that Javier, could you do, help us with that? Because Elena, someone is asking for the links in order to be able to follow. Okay.
Yeah, sure thing.
The sky is falling. Tlaloc is angry at me because I didn't explain.
Falling down.
Thank you so much.
My internet connection is so slow. Okay, so that's the Facebook page. I write down our YouTube channel.
Bye, Xiaopei. Thank you, Guillermo. ¿Quieres venir aquí? No, pero ya. We have candles now.